Morning. Who's the cute one with the ribbons? Hi.
This one's Lena. Say hi.
Hi. Hi.
How did your speech go?
My speech. Oh, it went great. I was like, my speech. What did I do? No, it was great. It was really, it was great because it was just, directed towards my 8-year-old niece. And so it didn't have to be very long. But I think it went great. I thank you for asking. She's a very cute little kid. You know how it is when your niece asks you to do something, you just say yes, ma'am. Well, even if you don't think that you're really able to do it. But thank you for asking. That's how it went. It went really great. I went there and
That's good. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, I struggled with a migraine the whole entire time I was there. And promptly I left probably just 2 or 3 hours after class ended, and I got there and I struggled with the migraine most of the day, but I came home that night. So I went Friday night and came back Saturday because I just needed to be home again. But she's an awesome little girl. She's the youngest of 5. And she's the ideal caboose.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, buddy.
So
Oh, excuse me.
it
Sorry.
is an early morning. So first, are there any questions, concerns? So what I want to do, like I said, we aren't going to finish all the chapters, and I know that at this point. But I want to finish. I want to keep going with lab, so I don't want to take more lab time to do lecture stuff because I really would. You need to get something about the reproductive system and learn something about the reproductive system in this class. And that will be in lab next week. And we'll do both the male and female ones in one day. And what else? I want to finish fluid and electrolyte today and possibly start the digestive system and do the digestive lab. I've kept it relatively short, the digestive lab, because if we can work on some of lecture during lab, that would be great. Let's just see how it goes. Any questions? One other thing, and I think, some of this I'm preaching to the choir, but excuse me, the second case study is out and it's posted. And if you look at it, it is about a case of diabetes. And I think you will find it interesting. And if you haven't done the first case study, do the first case study. No, I have not graded them yet. But if you do not do either one, it automatically is going to dock your grade by about, 7%. And I know that a lot of people have not done it or submitted it. So please get it submitted. The second one, oh, the third one. So in the syllabus, you're supposed to do 3. We're not going to do 3. I will give you points for the third case study because we're just running out of time. And so keep going with the smart book assignments and the quizzes for the chapters. And if you think it's really, really hard, let me know in your evaluations that you found it really hard. But I still want you to get the exposure to the material. Any questions? All right. I'm watching my cat up here, and I'm going to turn around my screen so you can see him. You see my cat up in the window? Tell me you can or you can't.
Oh, yeah.
He likes to watch the birds and sit there and pretend he's going to attack the birds, even though we know he's not going to. But he thoroughly enjoys watching them from any window. Okay. What are you doing?
I have a real quick question. I'm sorry.
No, you're all right. No.
Were the due dates correct? The ones from yesterday, there were like 8 things or 7 or something like that were due. And I was like, oh my gosh, when am I going to be done with?
The Wiley lab exercises, try to get those done on time. The other stuff, we'll just see what happens and I can delay them out.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the total body water, the amount of water in the body is approximately 60%. It varies between individuals based on gender, body mass, age, and the amount of adipose tissue. It's contained within 2 compartments: the extracellular fluid, which is composed of contains about 60% of the body's fluids, and the extracellular fluid, which between the blood and the blood plasma and the interstitial fluid is about 40% of the total body water. So where is the greatest volume of water in the body found?
A.
Yep, that's right, intracellular fluid. Organic biomolecules in the extracellular and intracellular fluid. You guys, do you remember, by definition, what does an organic biomolecule have to have in it to be considered a biomolecule?
Is it carbon?
Carbon and what else? What else was it?
Hydrogen?
It was carbon and hydrogen. Good job, because I know that was like biology 121. But yes, that's what it was. Good job. So proteins, phospholipids, and cholesterol neutral fats account for 90% of the mass of solutes in the plasma. 60% of the solutes in the interstitial fluid, and 97% of the solutes in the intracellular fluid. So let me say this a little differently. 90% of the solutes in the plasma consists of proteins, phospholipids, cholesterol, and neutral fats. 60% of the solutes in the interstitial fluid are proteins, phospholipids, cholesterol, and neutral fats. And 97% of the solutes in the intracellular fluid are proteins, phospholipids, cholesterols, and fats. If you can't tell, a lot of it is organic biomolecules as a whole. Each fluid compartment, in addition to these biomolecules, contains electrolytes. My mom we've had kind of a rough week this week in our house, and she's not sick, but she's still sleeping, which she never sleeps past 7. But she would tell you, and I'll tell you, that electrolyte is highly important with regards to healthcare, electrolyte balance. So even though 90%, 97%, 60% are organic biomolecules, electrolytes is a major concern. Each fluid compartment has its own pattern. Extracellular fluids are similar to proteins. The chief cation is sodium, and the chief anion, because chloride tends to follow sodium. If we can follow the homeostasis of sodium, we're following the homeostasis of chloride. Excuse me. Yes, that's what I meant to say. If we can follow the pattern of flow of sodium, we also are following the pattern of the flow of chloride when it comes to homeostasis. Not true for membrane potentials, but when it comes to homeostasis, it's true. One of the major reasons why, so if you remember, and Zena probably remembers better than most because we've just gone over this in 121. Sodium enters the cell, potassium leaves the cell, right? Chloride does not leave with sodium. So one of the major pulls to get sodium back out of the cell after an action potential is chloride, is the pull that chloride has on getting sodium back out of the cell. Hope that makes sense. One of the most attractive forces to getting sodium back out of the cell once we've had an action potential is the negative charge of chlorine to try to pull sodium back out of the cell. Intracellular fluids, in contrast, have a low sodium and low chlorine, but they're highly concentrated in potassium. And phosphate is the chief anion. What this also means is that when we look at the flow back and forth of different anions, sodium and chlorine are going to tend to follow one another. Potassium and phosphate will tend to be grouped together. And they will move in opposite directions, almost always. So if sodium is coming in the cell, potassium is leaving. If chlorine is coming out of the cell, potassium is going inside, phosphate's going inside. So they're moving in opposite directions. As we go through this next part of this chapter, keep that in the back of your mind, and I'll try to bring it up again when we see it, that certain things are always moving in opposition to one another when we talk about things coming in the cell, things coming out. So sodium and potassium concentrations in the extracellular and intracellular fluid are nearly opposites. And this reflects the activity of the cellular ATP-dependent sodium-potassium pumps. What were the sodium-potassium pumps? What were the sodium-potassium pumps?
Isn't that what pumps the sodium or whatever in and out of the
Does it pump it out, pump it in?
in?
Sodium?
Oh no, pumps sodium goes out.
Yes, and potassium comes in.
Yeah.
And this is, so the major reason why these are almost opposites or nearly opposites is because of the sodium potassium pumps. Electrolytes are going to determine the chemical and physical reactions of fluids. Ion fluxes are restricted and move selectively by active transport. Nutrients, respiratory gases, and waste move unidirectionally. Remember, gases tend to move by mass transport. Where's the pressure the highest? The pressure is the highest one place. Things always move from a high to a low. Plasma is the only fluid that circulates throughout the body and links the external and the internal environments. The osmolarities of all body fluids are equal, and the changes in the solute concentrations are quickly followed by osmotic changes. What is osmolarity? What is osmolarity?
Concentration.
Yeah, think of it as a concentration. For right now, think of it as a concentration. We'll elaborate on it again in a moment here. But in a general rule, it's the cosmic concentration. Does water tend to flow from where it's more, from where the solute is more concentrated, or where the solute is less concentrated? Does it flow into where the solute is more concentrated, or does it flow to where the solute is less concentrated?
Where it's less concentrated. It's trying to get away from where it's fully concentrated.
No, it
The
doesn't.
opposite.
It's the opposite, because solute, remember how it works. If there's more solute in an area, there's less water.
Okay.
So solute will move according to its concentration gradient. Water will move according to its own concentration gradient because everything moves according to its own concentration gradient. Every distinct thing moves with its own concentration gradient. So changes in the solute concentration as these ions are moving back and forwards, back one direction in the next direction, are quickly followed by osmotic changes because waters, remember what osmotic changes means? That means water flow. Because it's just referring to osmosis. So regulation of water intake, it's highly important. Little kids, you know, Zena probably knows this better than most with her two very, very tiny kids. They're not really tiny, but they're cute kids. They're tiny in that I can't imagine. Zena, can I tell them how old they are?
Sure.
They're 5 and 6, and they're 10 months apart in age. I think it's a little nuts, but they sure are cute.
So she has Irish twins.
Yes.
They
My
are.
sister and I are Irish twins. We were born 2 years apart on the same day.
Wow. Wow.
I
Oh,
know, it sucks.
That's that. Wow. All right. So especially with little kids and older people, little kids, because they're more prone to dehydration, and adults because the thirst center becomes more inhibited and they're less likely to sense when they're thirsty. Older people. So the hypothalamic thirst center, where you detect, oh wait, I'm thirsty. I need to go get a drink of water. My throat's dry. I need to go get a drink of water. Is stimulated when there's a decline in the blood volume of 10 to 15%. You guys, when there's a decline in the plasma volume, meaning there's a decline in the water volume, what's going to happen to the concentration of the plasma?
More concentrated.
Yeah, it becomes more concentrated. So a decline in the plasma volume is going to result in a decline in the concentration. Another word for concentration is the osmolarity. So the thirst center is going to get stimulated when there's a decline in the plasma volume by 10 to 15%. It's going to be increased. Excuse me, it's going to be stimulated again when there's a plasma concentration increase of 1 to 2%, meaning because the volume's gone down, so it's getting more concentrated. And also via baroreceptor input from the carotid sinuses and the aortic arches. Thirst is quenched as soon as we begin to drink water. And the feedback signals from this drinking of the water include the moistening of the mucosa in the mouth and throat and the activation of the stomach and intestinal stretch receptors. So dehydration can lead to increased blood osmolarity. Remember that same concentration. Come here, baby. Come here. Paisley, come here. Come here. Come here. You silly girl. Come here. Reduced, so increased concentration, reduced volume. Because if you have reduced volume, you have reduced blood pressure. Reduced blood pressure is going to result in renin being secreted. Remember that renin-angiotensin system? Angiotensin goes up. It stimulates the hypothalamic osmoreceptors. So angiotensin 2, we talked about how it's going to get triggered here. It's going to get triggered by baroreceptor input because all of a sudden the baroreceptors are not firing because the blood pressure is dropped. And angiotensin 2 and other stimuli like aldosterone. The increased blood concentration stimulates osmoreceptors. Stimulation of the osmoreceptors, increased blood concentration or blood osmolarity, reduced blood pressure, all work to reduce salivation, giving you dry mouth, the sense of thirst. Well, how do you fix that? You ingest water. The ingestion of water cools and moistens the mucosa of the mouth, distends the stomach and intestines, and rehydrates the blood long term. So fluid intake is governed mainly by the hypothalamic neurons called what?
Is it D?
It's the osmoreceptors. Think osmo meaning water because osmosis. In response to dehydration, osmoreceptors stimulate the secretion of what?
Is it ADH?
It's ADH, antidiuretic hormone. Correct. You guys are smart. Regulation of water output. So you have to have a certain amount of water output any day, every day. These are obligatory water losses. So it's obligated that you're going to lose this much water. You're going to lose it through these ways. Insensible water losses from the lungs, respiration, and sweat through the skin. Water also accompanies food residues in the feces. The kidneys have to excrete 900 to 1200 milliosmoles of solutes to maintain blood homeostasis. They have to. These solutes have to be flushed out of the body in water. So we lose water from our bodies through 60% being urine, feces 4%, insensible losses like respiratory 28%, 8% is sweat. Water loss increases the plasma osmolarity. As we've talked about this, so it's going to result in reduced volume, upping the concentration or the osmolarity that triggers the thirst or release of antidiuretic hormone. Water reabsorption in the collecting ducts is proportional to how much antidiuretic hormone is released. So if you don't have any antidiuretic hormone being released, you don't get any water reabsorption, or very, very little. If you get high antidiuretic hormone release, then you get really, really high water reabsorption. If you get really, really high water reabsorption from the urine, the result is that you get really concentrated urine because you pulled all the water out of it. If you're not having a lot of antidiuretic hormone being released, the result is that you don't have, you have very dilute urine because you've left all the water in the urine. Question for you. So the hypothalamus triggers antidiuretic hormone release. What causes it? Where is it actually released from? It gets triggered to be released from the hypothalamus, but where is it stored and then released? If it helps, it's made in the hypothalamus, but then it's stored somewhere else. Where is it stored?
Is it in the interior pituitary?
You're so close. What's the other part of the pituitary?
Posterior?
That's where it's stored. That's where it's stored. So it's stored in the same place where oxytocin is. They're both made in the hypothalamus and they're stored in the posterior pituitary. The hypothalamic osmoreceptors trigger the inhibit or release of ADH. Factors that specifically trigger ADH release include prolonged fever, excessive sweating, vomiting or diarrhea because you're getting a lot of water loss. Severe blood loss and traumatic burns, all of these result in extreme water loss. So these are going to trigger the release of antidiuretic hormone. This is kind of squished up, but it says the mechanisms and consequences of antidiuretic hormone release. And so I jumped ahead when asking that question about where it was stored because the answer is right here. But I know we talked about it when we talked about the endocrine system and the kidneys maybe. So dehydration, reduced water loss, and increased sodium concentration. Remember, if you're reducing water, the solute concentrations are going up because things get more concentrated if you remove the water from it, just like dehydrating fruit. So decreased water or increased sodium are going to increase the blood concentration or osmolarity. They're going to stimulate the hypothalamic osmoreceptors, saying you're low on water. The posterior pituitary is going to release antidiuretic hormone. Which is going to stimulate the distal convoluted tubules and the collecting duct and make you feel thirsty. if you drink water, you moisten the mucosa of your mouth and your throat, your intestinal receptors stretch, your water concentration goes up. You increase water reabsorption. You reduce blood volume. Actually, wait. Let me do that again. Yes, that's right. Okay, you increase water reabsorption, pulling it from the water. So, excuse me, pulling it from the urine, pulling water from the urine by reabsorbing it. You reduce urine volume and increase the ratio of sodium and water in the urine. Decreasing sodium concentration levels. And this figure just showing that where antidiuretic hormone is working on the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct, causing you to absorb a lot more water from what will become the urine down here. Questions? Most body water intake is from where? Whereas most body water lost is via what?
D.
D is in delta. Yes. So drinking and urine. So most water intake is from drinking, whereas most water loss is via the urine. What is the function of antidiuretic hormone, ADH?
B.
D is in delta?
B is in Becky.
B is in Becky. Yes. Okay. Yes. So disorders of water balance. Dehydration. The body is in a negative fluid balance when water loss exceeds water intake. So when you've lost more water than you're bringing in. Causes include hemorrhage, severe burns, prolonged vomiting, diarrhea, profuse sweating, water deprivation, or abuse of diuretics. Signs include cotton mouth, so dry mouth, thirst, flushed skin, and oliguria. Oliguria, meaning little urine being produced. That olig always means small or little. So oliguria meaning very little urine produced. Prolonged dehydration can lead to weight loss, fever, and mental confusion. If you've ever dealt with heat stroke, it's not fun. I've only had it one time, and I remember it actually being kind of frightening because it does lead to mental confusion. Other consequences include hypovolemic shock. What's hypovolemic shock?
Losing a lot of blood.
Yeah, losing a lot of blood or yeah, which is essentially meaning you're losing a lot of water volume too. And loss of electrolytes, because electrolytes follow water. Water follows electrolytes, electrolytes follow water. So excessive water loss from the extracellular fluid is going to result in the osmotic pressure of the extracellular fluid rising because the concentration's going up. And as a result, cells lose water to the extracellular fluid. because they're going to work to equalize those solute concentrations. So water loss from the extracellular fluid is going to cause the osmotic pressure in the extracellular fluid to rise because the concentration is going up. And the cells are going to lose water because they're going to try to equalize that osmotic pressure in the extracellular fluid. And the result is that the cells shrink. If they shrink, they start losing their function, because remember how important structure is to function. And function is to structure. The opposite, actually, yeah, the opposite, hypotonic hydration. What does it mean to be hypotonic?
Too much
Too much what?
water.
Too much water.
Water.
Yes, too much water or very little solutes in a lot of water. So this can result from either renal insufficiency, renal malfunction, or an extracellular an extraordinary amount of water being ingested, leading to cellular overhydration or water intoxication. People have died from water intoxication. It does exist. The extracellular fluid is diluted. The sodium concentration is normal, but there's too much water present. They would have normal sodium levels if it was a normal sodium osmolarity if there was less water present. So the sodium content is normal, but there's too much water. The resulting hyponatremia promotes osmosis into the tissue cells, causing swelling of the cells. So in opposition to the cells shrinking, they're going to swell. These events must be reversed to prevent severe metabolic disturbances. Hypotonic hydration. So this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about here as a diagram. Excessive water enters the extracellular fluid. The osmotic pressure fails, or we're becoming hypotonic. And to equalize out the osmolarity between that and the cells swell as water moves into the cells. And structure is very important to function. So we've disrupted the structure, we disrupt the function. So summary of these ideas: two different forms of fluid imbalance. Volume depletion, hypovolemia. The fluid volume is reduced, the total body water is reduced, but the osmolarity is normal. Dehydration. The water volume is reduced and you're hypertonic. The person is hypertonic, meaning that their extracellular fluid is highly concentrated. excess volume of water. Their total body water is elevated. But they're also isotonic. Their osmolarity is the same, is normal. Hypotonic hydration, their blood total body water is elevated, but their tonicity is reduced. Questions? Edema. So a typical is an atypical accumulation of fluid in the interstitial space, so in between the cells, resulting in tissue swelling. It can be caused by anything that increases the flow of fluids out of the bloodstream or hinders the return. Factors accelerating fluid loss include increased blood pressure, capillary permeability, incompetent venous valves, localized blood vessel blockage, and congestive heart failure, hypertension, or high blood volume. Because if you have high blood volume, you're going to have more osmosis into the tissues from the cat blood. The hindered return, edema reflects hindered return of the fluid that's been leaked from the capillaries back to the blood. So remember how much capillaries tend to leak fluid into the interstitial tissues. Well, what if that fluid is not getting returned via the lymphatics or at the venous end of the capillaries? This can be caused by there being hypoproteinemia, meaning there's reduced protein levels in the plasma. Forces are pushing fluids out of the capillary beds, but the fluids are failing to return at the venous end. And can result from protein malnutrition, liver disease, and glomerulonephritis. Another cause can be blocked or surgically removed lymph vessels. Remember, if it's not all the fluid gets reabsorbed at the venous end of capillaries. So as a result, bear with me. So as a result, the lymphatic system takes up that fluid and removes it, returns it to the blood. So another cause of edema can be blocked or surgically removed lymph vessels that can cause proteins to leaked proteins to accumulate in the interstitial fluid, drawing the water into the interstitial fluid. Because if leaked proteins are accumulating in a compartment, that means the concentration is going up in that compartment. And this exerts an increased colloid osmotic pressure, drawing the fluid from the blood. If the concentration in the interstitial fluid is going up, more fluid is going to be moving from the blood into the tissues. So interstitial fluid accumulation can result in low blood pressure because you're not getting the volume returned back to the blood. and severely impaired circulation, because if your pressure is low, if your pressure is low, your circulation is low. Because remember what drives circulation? Pressure. In which compartment would fluid accumulate in edema?
Is it C?
I think you're right. Yeah, see. So solute classifications. This is about the end of where we talk about. We're done talking about water for the most part. Non-electrolytes, like organic biomolecules, generally have covalent bonds. They do not dissociate into charged particles in water. And examples are glucose, lipids, creatinine, and urea. Remember that slide we went over talking about the organic biomolecules and where they're stored? Those are all non-electrolytes. Electrolytes are going to ionize when in water. They're going to dissociate into ions or charged particles. Particles conduct electricity in solution of water, and electrolytes have a greater osmotic power than non-electrolytes, meaning water is going to move more according to the gradients formed by electrolytes. Examples of electrolytes are inorganic salts, all acids and bases, and some proteins. Because some proteins ionize also, resulting in the overall negative charge inside cells. So comparisons of electrolytes versus electrolytes. Electrolyte solution is going to conduct electricity or an electric current. Solutions of non-electrolytes will not conduct a current. So the reason electrolytes are called electrolytes is because they can conduct a current. Questions? Electrolyte balance is maintained by the principle of mass balance or mass movement, mass transport. Electrolytes obtained from the diet must equal those lost from the body by a variety of routes. Several mechanisms, mostly hormonal, maintain electrolyte balance. Ion concentration is dependent not only on the number of ions in the body fluid, like the blood, but also on the amount of water in the body fluid. Because if we lose a lot of water, the ion concentration is still going to go up, even though we haven't added more ions. Just like concentrated drinks. If you want to dilute a concentrated drink, you add water to it. If you want to make it more concentrated, you either remove water from it or don't add as much water to it. So fluid balance is this critical factor that's going to determine electrolyte balance. So this is talking specifically about osmolarity and electrolyte concentrations. And it's expressed in milliequivalents per liter and is a measure of the number of electrical charges in 1 liter of solution. It's a concentration of a given ion. So if it's sodium chloride, that's going to ionize into sodium and chloride too. The milliosmoles are going to be double what it would normally be for one ion thing that doesn't dissociate in water. So the milliequivalents of 1 ion per liter is the concentration of that ion divided by its atomic weight times by the number of charges. So for a single charged ion, 1 milliequivalent is equal to 1 milliosmol. For a bivalent ion like calcium that has 2 positive charge, 1 milliequivalent is equal to half an milliosmol. Bear with me here just for a second. Is that your baby German Shepherd, Becky?
No, it's the other one, and she just likes to bury herself. So she's trying to bury herself in the pillows, and she's driving me crazy.
I can see that.
She partially thinks she's a cat as well.
Okay.
There, she finally calmed down. She likes to sit at the edge of the bed. Now the ears you'll see here and there, that's the German Shepherd. He's trying to chew his bone on my laptop.
Oh, well, that's important. Okay. All right. So, so the concentration of the ion, let's say that we have a 1 millimolar solution of sodium. So 1 millimole. Sodium. This is terrible. Sodium. So 1 millimole per liter times divided by the atomic weights. And I'm going to look up on my phone what the atomic weight is. I think it's 35.44, but I think that's right. I think it's 14 actually. I'm going to use a different color though. Where's my phone? Where's my phone? Mom, would you check in the bathroom for my phone? Let's see if it's on there. Or somebody want to look up the atomic weight of sodium? Oh, okay, my phone's right here. Never mind. As my mom calls it, never mind. Atomic weight of sodium. Atomic weight of sodium. Oh, and you know what? I'm doing it wrong. I knew I was. Okay.
Is it 22.9?
22.9. Okay. I knew I was doing it wrong. It's not the osmolar, it's not the molarity here, it's concentration. So let's come back and look at this one more time. So let's say we have 25 milligrams of sodium of sodium. Yeah. And that's a terrible, but that's it right there. 25 milligrams. Sorry, bear with me here. Okay. Sodium, Na plus equals 25 milligrams of sodium in 1 liter times by the molecular weight, which is 22.9. 22.9 moles per liter, or no, moles per gram. And I'm gonna change this to not milligrams, but I'm gonna make it grams so that I can actually calculate it out right. So I'm gonna say 0.025 grams. Times by the charge on sodium. Charge on sodium, which is +1. +1. So the grams is going to cancel out, and we're going to be left with what's left. Let me get a word count. So 0.025 on 0.025 times 22.9 is 0.057. 0.57, sorry, 0.57 times by +1. So that tells me, if I'm right, that it's 0.57 milliequivalents per liter of sodium. And because we know that sodium is just a monoion or single ion, meaning that ion charge, meaning it just has a +1 charge, a monovalent ion. 1.057 milliequivalents is going to be equal to 0.57 milliequivalents per liter. We can change this and we can say calcium. Calcium. Do this as calcium. Oh, let me finish this for sodium. Bear with me. I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second here. Sodium. And sodium. And so 0.057 milliequivalents of sodium is equal to 0.57 milliosmoles. So now I'm going to take this whole thing and I'm going to make it for calcium instead, because we know calcium is different because it has a 2 positive charge. So what do we have to change? Well, we have to determine what's the atomic weight of calcium. Atomic weight of calcium. .7. So we'll go with 40.1. And this is actually a 2 positive charge in this case, because that's that, oh shoot, now I'm messing it all up. 22, 9. This is a 1, because this is what it is for sodium. When it's calcium, the atomic weight is going to be 40.1 moles per gram. And this is going to be a 2 positive charge instead. And so .1, and then is one almost one exactly times a positive 2. So it's 2.00 milliequivalents per liter. And we know when it's a milliequivalent for a divalent ion, meaning it's got a 2 positive charge, it's going to be halved when it's a milliosmol. So this is going to be 0. This is just showing you the relationship between milliequivalents and milliosmoles, because electrolytes are described as milliequivalents. That's all it's showing you. I only calculated in the numbers to show you exactly how it was done. You don't need to learn how it's done. I'm not going to ask you to calculate the milliequivalents. You don't need to be able to remember how to calculate that all out, but recognize what it is. It's just the way electrolytes are expressed in concentrations. Normal milliequivalents for sodium. And if you look down here, bear with me here. I'm going to show you this table. Normal milliequivalents for sodium are 135 to 145. In that osmolarity, it's 135 to 145 because it's the same. 1 milliequivalent equals 1 milliosmol. For magnesium, because magnesium has a 2 positive charge, milliequivalents are 1.5 to 2.5. It's halved when you're referring to the milliosmoles. Phosphorus, which has a positive 3 charge, is going to be 1/3. So the 1 milliequivalent is going to be equal to 1/3 of the milliosmoles. So 2.5 divided by 3 is approximately 0.8. All we want you to do right here is understand the relationship between milliequivalents and milliosmoles. That's all. If you're going to be asked to calculate a milliequivalent and a milliosmol, it's not going to be in this class. Might be next class, but it won't be in this class. Okay. So moving forward, electrolyte concentrations in the blood plasma and in the intracellular fluid. Normal electrolytes in the blood plasma: sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium, magnesium, and phosphate. When we add up all of their osmolarities, because this is the milliequivalents, when we add up all their osmolarities, they're going to come to 300. If you figured out what the milliosmoles was for each one of these numbers, and I'm not going to do it right now. If you figured out what the milliosmolarities were for each of these ions and added them together, it would be 300. If you, in the intracellular fluid, if you added all of these osmolarities together, actually, bear with me, I am going to do it. Let's just see what happens, just for kicks. So sodium is 145. We know milliosmoles is still 145. Potassium is 4. Somebody be writing these down for me. 145 plus 4 plus 103. Calcium, that has a milliosmol, a milliequivalence of 5, because it's got a 2 positive charge, is going to be 2.5.
Okay, so it was 145, 4, and then is it 103? Is that what you're?
This isn't going to come out right. Let's do it differently. 145 plus 4 plus 103. And calcium, because it's going to be, oh, I'm gonna do something really quick. Bear with me. I need a minute. I thought last night as I was slipping into a coma, I thought you need to go through and calculate this table and understand it. And I didn't. So give me 1 second because I don't want to tell you wrong.
Well, you were dreaming that. I was dreaming about the proximal convoluted tubule. So, I mean,
Oh, awesome.
was-
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
I was like, what in the world? But hey,
All right, never mind. Whatever I'm calculating out in my head is not working. So I will look at this later and try to explain it to you later, but I'm not going to try right now. Because whatever I'm doing is not right. So let's skip over that for right now. Electrolyte balance. Electrolytes are salts, acids, and bases. But when we talk about electrolyte balances, we're usually only referring to salts. We're not referring to acids or bases. So salts, as you know, thinking about sodium and potassium and calcium, are very important for neuromuscular excitability, secretory activity, membrane permeability, and controlling fluid movements because water follows the concentrations of the osmolarity. Salts enter the body via ingestion and are lost via perspiration, feces, and urine. Sodium, if you can have a favorite electrolyte, this is it. Sodium is central to fluid and electrolyte balance. It accounts for 90 to 95% of all solutes in the extracellular fluid and is about 280 milliosmoles of the total 300 milliosmoles in the extracellular fluid. That's why we're wrong. You guys, actually, never mind. Never mind. Okay. Contribute to 280 milliosmoles of the total milliosmol extracellular fluid solutes. Sodium is the single most abundant cation in the extracellular fluid. It has the major role in controlling extracellular fluid volumes because it's the only cation that's going to exert significant osmotic pressure, meaning it's the only cation that's going to have a strong force in dictating how water moves or has a significant dictation in how water is going to move. Sodium always leaks into the cells and it's pumped out against its concentration, its electrochemical gradient. Always leaks into the cells and it's pumped out against its electrochemical gradient. Because it's all, so potassium is always being pumped in, sodium is always being pumped out. The sodium concentration in the extracellular fluid normally remains stable though. So we love sodium. It's our favorite. We love sodium. Changes in the sodium levels are going to affect plasma volume and thereby blood pressure. It's also going to affect intracellular fluid and interstitial fluid volumes. It's also going to affect renal acid base control, are going to be coupled to sodium transport. Acid base meaning how the kidneys control the pH is going to be affected by how they control sodium transport. What is the principal cation found in the extracellular fluid?
D, sodium.
It's sodium, D-sodium. What determines osmosis from one fluid compartment to another?
B.
B is in Bravo. Yep, the concentration of solutes in each compartment. You guys, let's take a 5-minute break. I don't know if you're feeling like I am this morning. I need 5 minutes.
Yeah, I have my dogs are bugging, so I will.
Oh,
Thank
all
you.
right. We'll be back in a second. Okay. Hi, what are you doing? Missed it. Evan was sitting on top, laying on top of Leo, and Leo tried to move and Evan bit Leo. And then Leo got back for some reason. See. Oh, shit. Let's see. Oil exercises. Um, electrolyte acid base balance. I didn't open it.
Good morning. How are you?
Morning. I'm looking at your email. I thought, shoot, as I just let you into the meeting, I thought, oh wait, what am I missing? Give me 1 second.
I'm sorry. I was having problems getting on this morning, and I had to put my dog to sleep.
I'm
Yes.
so sorry. Oh wow.
It's been such a hard week. Yeah, I'm not okay.
I what was it expected with your dog?
Well, no.
Oh,
Renal failure. Like,
oh,
just took her in. He was like, because she didn't eat for 2 days. And I was like, okay, something's really wrong. Like, dog's not eating, right?
right.
And he was like, her like creatinine, all that. He was like, yeah, he was like, if this were a human, they need a kidney transplant. Like,
Oh,
it was bad. And she was like 11, 12. Like, I thought I'd have her much longer than.
what type of dog was she?
So I rescued
Oh,
her
I
from.
would be expecting her to have her longer too.
Right. So I've never had an animal that didn't live to be 15, right? My cat's 19, my last dog 15, 16, right? But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, this is probably the youngest dog I've ever put down. And, the vet told me, he was like, look, like, if this were my dog, I would put her down right now. He was like, she's uncomfortable, she's not well. So
Oh wow.
anyway, I've had a rough week.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Well, jeez. I just fixed those lab exercises. They're open now.
Okay. I think I did everything. It was just like that one assignment that was like, I kept checking all week and it wasn't open.
They're open now.
Okay.
Why didn't you text me earlier? No,
Because-
it's all right. No,
Because I should have, but I don't know if you noticed, like, well, you probably didn't. You don't know. There's no way you have so many students, but like, no, I think I was working from like 4 o'clock yesterday to 9 o'clock last night on everything.
yeah.
So
Oh wow.
to
All
get
right.
caught is, I've had a week. So that's all. That's okay.
Oh,
That happens sometimes.
all right. You guys, let's come back into this. And yeah, Claire just let me know that your lab exercise for the digestive system that was due last night.
Yeah, it was
Was
just
it-
that one. I think it
Well,
was like
yeah.
34.
But it
They just-
hasn't been open all week. It's open now.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Hey, okay. Then I will do it.
Now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize. Oh, I really, wow. Okay. Well, I'm surprised some people got it done because I'm guessing it was because it was open until last. I don't know what happened there, but it's open now. Okay. Okay, let's jump back into this. Hi, baby doll. You're a cute little girl.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking to my cat too. I'll mute myself.
I understand. You're talking to my teaching assistant, huh? Yeah, you're pretty cute.
Aren't they though?
They are the best.
They are. They are.
So you're pretty fun. Little fluffy butt, huh?
Aw.
She lets me call her fluffy butt. She'll really let me call her anything as long as I love her. But my mother doesn't allow me to call her that. We just call her that when my mother's not around.
Is she a poodle? They're like so
Yes.
smart. Poodles are so
She
smart.
is really smart, and she's just smart enough that she can get herself in a lot of trouble really quick. She knows when she's not being watched, and she just kind of wanders off. And she looks to make sure that you're really not paying attention. Yes, I'm a little pill pot, but I sure am cute. Okay, so regulation of sodium balance, aldosterone. So aldosterone is the key hormone involved in regulating sodium movement. So 70% of sodium is reabsorbed in the proximal convoluted tubules. 25% is reclaimed in the nephron loop. When aldosterone levels are high, all of the sodium is actively reabsorbed. So the last 5%, so it's normally 70% of it is going to be absorbed in the proximal convoluted tubules. 25% of it's going to be reabsorbed in the nephron loops. The other 5% is going to get reabsorbed depending on whether aldosterone is present. And you guys, if you'd be willing to turn on your cameras again, I'd really appreciate it, just so I don't feel like I'm talking to myself. Thank you. And water follows sodium if the tubules, meaning the distal convoluted tubules and the collecting ducts, are permeable to water, because you have to have antidiuretic hormone to be present for the tubes to be permeable. So adrenal cortical cells will release aldosterone in response to high potassium levels also. Why would they be stimulated and to release aldosterone when potassium levels are high? What would high potassium levels tell you about what's going on with sodium?
Low.
You have too much.
You have too much what? Or what's too low?
Low sodium, high potassium, because they have invert relationship.
Exactly. Good job, booyah. Yes. So high potassium levels are going to relate to low sodium. That is the reason that the adrenal cortical cells are going to secrete aldosterone when there's high potassium levels. Is because that if there's high potassium, there's low sodium. So aldosterone slowly brings about its effects through diminished urine output and increased blood volume. So if you have reduced urine output, meaning you're going to reabsorb most of the water, you're going to have increased blood volume. So hypotension, meaning reduced blood volume is going to result in the release of renin, which is going to result in the increased levels of angiotensin 2. Low sodium levels is going to cause release of aldosterone. High potassium levels are going to result in the release of aldosterone. Aldosterone is going to stimulate the renal tubules to reabsorb sodium and secrete potassium. Really quickly, I'm going to start, now that we're really moving into the big time stuff with electrolytes, I'm going to put this up here. So here, sodium moves one direction, potassium moves the other direction. Sodium moves one way. Potassium moves the other way. So if we reabsorb sodium, we're going to secrete potassium. And that's what happens with aldosterone. We're going to remove sodium from the filtrate and add more potassium to the filtrate. So we're going to increase sodium reabsorption, which is going to result in less sodium being found in the urine, and water will follow if antidiuretic hormone is present. If antidiuretic hormone is not present, water will not follow, because the collecting duct is not permeable unless there's antidiuretic hormone. We will also increase potassium secretion, and more potassium will be found in the urine. And both of these are going to result in reduced aldosterone release. If we bring up the sodium levels and lower the potassium levels, we will inhibit aldosterone release in a negative feedback loop. Questions? So where are the cells with aldosterone receptors found?
Can you please repeat that? I missed it.
Where are cells with aldosterone receptors found?
I want to say like A or B.
I'm gonna say no.
Oh wait, or okay, pituitary.
Nope. No.
No.
It's actually
Wrong.
it's released. It's released. Where is aldosterone gonna bind?
Adrenal cortex. Wait.
Wait, no,
Oh.
that's where it's shh, Louis, buddy, Louis. Hey, yeah, you keeping us safe?
Well, is the answer to that question is D, the proximal convoluted tubule?
It's
I think it's
E.
E.
It's
No.
E.
We guessed them all. It's got to be one of them. We're getting there.
It's
Process of
E.
elimination.
Bear with me. It's E. It's E. Because where what when you think of an aldosterone receptor, what you're thinking about is what's going to be responsive to the effects of aldosterone. What's going to be affected by it? Mom, will you come break up a cat fight?
It's my house every day too. Oh my goodness.
Well, my one cat likes to you make him move. She was there the whole time.
I wanted to clarify that we weren't the cat fight. It was at your house, right?
No, you were not the cat fight. You're right. You weren't the cat fight.
Class is getting really interesting. No, I'm
That was
teasing.
really fun. Yes, you were. Becky, I really wish you'd quit antagonizing other people in the class.
I know. My husband tells me that all the time.
Well, and he's right. All right. For once, he's right.
I won't let him know that though.
Okay, good. We don't want it to go to his head.
Definitely not.
So where are cells with aldosterone receptors found? Well, what cells are going to be responsive to aldosterone? It's going to be the distal convoluted tubule, because that's where any obligatory sodium is going to be reabsorbed. So this is what we're looking for. Stimulates the renal cortex to secrete aldosterone. Aldosterone stimulates the renal tubules, increasing sodium reabsorption. And at the same time, if we're going to increase sodium resorption, we're going to increase potassium secretion, because they go in opposition to one another. Regulation of sodium balance, or RAS, the renin-angiotensin system, triggers the release of aldosterone. So one of the effects of angiotensin 2 is to trigger the release of aldosterone. Because remember what the RAS system does, it works to bump up blood pressure. So this is mediated via the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Remember, this is the distal convoluted tubule and the afferent arterioles of the kidneys, which releases renin in response to increased sympathetic nervous system stimulation, decreased filtrate osmolarity, because if we decrease the osmolarity, we're decreasing the concentration, meaning we've got a lower volume. Decreased stretch because of decreased blood pressure. If we have less stretch, it's because there's less blood pressure. So renin catalyzes the production of angiotensin 2, which prompts aldosterone release. This is a figure that I got from Stevenson. For some reason, it's on one of the front pages of one of my course sites, but I think it's a good figure. And so we're going to walk through it. And when you look at something this complicated, start one place. So I'm going to start right here with 1, because it says 1, and that's therefore very convenient. 1, dehydration. So either we're dehydration, sodium deficiency, meaning we got reduced levels of sodium, or we're hemorrhaging. The result is that we get decreased blood volume. Decreased blood volume is going to result in decreased pressure, blood pressure. As a result, the kidneys, the juxtaglomerular cells in the kidneys are going to increase renin concentrations in the blood. Renin is going to take angiotensinogen 2, angiotensinogen from the kidneys and convert it to angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1, once it circulates in the lungs, is going to become angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 is going to cause vasoconstriction of arterioles, which is going to cause the blood pressure to go up. If you cause the vessels to constrict, blood pressure goes up. Angiotensin 2 is also going to work on the adrenal cortex, increasing potassium and extracellular fluids. adrenal cortex is also going to result in increased aldosterone levels. If we increase aldosterone levels, we get more sodium and water reabsorption if antidiuretic hormone is present, which angiotensin II also does. And increased secretion of potassium and hydrogen into the urine. One other one that we need to add to our whiteboard maybe I want to add this, is that if sodium levels go up, actually, bear with me, I may not be right. I want to make sure I'm right. Yeah. If sodium levels go up, potassium levels go down. Sorry, hydrogen ion levels go down. Same thing here. So potassium and hydrogen ion levels are going to be in both flow. Their flow is going to be in opposition to sodium, both potassium and hydrogen. This is going to be important when we're talking about pH. So increased aldosterone results in increased sodium and water reabsorption. Increased reabsorption and increased secretion of potassium and hydrogen into the urine. All of this is going to result in increased blood volume, which is going to increase the blood pressure. I think that figure is great in explaining volume and sodium and fluid and potassium levels. So cardiovascular system baroreceptors. Increased blood pressure allows baroreceptors to alert the brain of increases in blood volume. This results in a decline of impulses to the sympathetic nervous system, to the kidneys. When the baroreceptors start to fire, we know that the blood volume has gone up. Blood pressure has gone up. There's a dilation of afferent arterioles in the kidneys, and therefore the filtration rate is going to go up. Sodium levels and water secretion and excretion is going to go up if the filtration rate goes up and we don't reabsorb that water, which is we're not going to do in this case. So baroreceptors start to fire. This declines the sympathetic nervous system impulses to the kidneys, resulting in dilation of the afferent arterioles in the kidneys, causing filtration rates to go up. And the result is that we get increased sodium and water excretion and secretion. This phenomenon called pressure diuresis is going to decrease the blood volume and decrease the blood pressure. We decrease the blood volume, we decrease the blood pressure. This drop in the systemic blood pressure results in opposite actions, and the blood pressure increases. Since sodium ion concentrations determine the fluid volume, baroreceptors can be viewed as sodium receptors. Since we know that we relate sodium levels to water levels, baroreceptors are viewed as sodium receptors.
Quick question.
Okay.
What's the difference between the osmoreceptors and the baroreceptors then? If the baroreceptors increase the blood pressure and all that,
Same thing. They're almost the same thing.
are they? Okay.
I mean, whether or not the osmoreceptors are really detecting water, or if they're just detecting increased volumes, I don't know. They might be doing the same thing,
Okay.
because what else is increasing the volume? I don't know what else would be increasing the volume there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, part of my answer there is I don't know, or they're possibly the same thing. Does that help?
Yes, they do sound like they're the same thing, but I wasn't sure. I don't know if one acted on
They
water.
sound like they're the same thing. Let me, if I get a chance, I'll look into it and I'll get back to you on it. But they sound like they're the same thing. It's a really good question. They sound like they're the same thing. Zena, are there any other questions that you want to ask that I can't answer?
Already answered it.
I love to ask these kind of questions, like your question about troponin the other night. I'm like, I don't know. Leo, you cannot be right here, buddy. No, you can't be right here. I don't want you to ruin my brand new shirt for some reason. I know your life is hard. Yep, your life is really, really hard. You my cranky pants. Yeah.
I gotta say that cut is so cute.
He's a cranky pants is what he is.
Aw. So cute.
He's my wild child, but he's my 15-year-old wild child. He'll be 15 in June. Are you comfortable? Okay. He's now starting to purr. So this figure, I'm going to elevate it just a little bit. So declining pressure and volume. Reduced stretch in the afferent arterioles of the kidneys is going to cause the juxtaglomerular cells in the kidneys to release renin. Declined blood pressure volume is going to reduce the filtrate volume in the distal convoluted tubules because we're going to reabsorb more water. Declining blood pressure volume levels are going to inhibit the baroreceptors in the blood vessels. Actually, let's look at it this way. One more thing, Zena, with regards to your question that I'm still not sure I know how to answer. Osmoreceptors are found in the hypothalamus. Baroreceptors are found in other places. Because we're not looking at, when we talk about the hypothalamus, we're not looking at baroreceptors because we're not looking at blood flow. So juxtaglomerular cells of the kidneys release renin. Renin converts angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1, with the help of ACE in the lungs, is going to be converted to angiotensin 2. If we inhibit the baroreceptors in the blood vessels, we increase the sympathetic nervous system stimulation, which is going to result in constriction of the arterioles, which is going to increase the peripheral resistance. The posterior, we're also, with decreased blood volume, going to increase the posterior pituitary to release antidiuretic hormone, which causes water reabsorption in the collecting ducts of the kidneys. Angiotensin II is going to work on the adrenal cortex to release aldosterone, which targets the kidney tubules, increasing sodium reabsorption and water reabsorption. Systemic arterioles are going to cause vasoconstriction, resulting in increased peripheral resistance, because if we vasoconstrict, we cause increased resistance. Net overall, we're going to increase the blood pressure by increasing the blood volume. Anytime you look at a diagram this big, start one place and move from that place. Sometimes it really doesn't matter sometimes where you start. You just start looking at it from one place and watch and follow the arrows. Which of the following occurs when blood volume and pressure get too high?
I'm gonna take a shot and go with B.
B is in Bravo.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the reverse. Why is it gonna be the reverse? What if the blood pressure gets too high? Do you want more antidiuretic hormone around?
No,
No.
you want it lower.
So what are we gonna do instead?
You're gonna inhibit the release of the ADH.
Yep, and that's going to cause us to secrete, have more water being in the urine, have more sodium in the urine, and less urine being produced. Or more urine being produced, sorry. Yeah, more urine being
I was gonna
produced.
say, if it's gonna increase the water, then I would think it would increase your urine output.
Oh boy, you're not making me comfortable here. Do you understand that? He doesn't care either.
They usually don't.
No, he doesn't care in the slightest. He's up here happily purring away. Antidiuretic hormone isn't being inhibited. All right, this is a great question, because I can tell you my physiology students at Stevenson would struggle with something like this. A hemorrhage results in which of the following? A decrease in water volume without significantly affecting the osmolarity. A decrease in water volume with an increase in osmolarity. A decrease in water volume and a decrease in osmolarity. An increase in extracellular fluid volume, but a decrease in intracellular fluid volume. Or a decrease in the extracellular fluid volume, but an increase in the intracellular fluid volume. If someone starts massively bleeding, is it going to immediately affect their osmolarity?
I want to say yes.
If they just start massively bleeding and you take out some of their blood just to see, is it going to affect their osmolarity?
I guess over time, but not immediately.
Not immediately, not immediately. What else is it going to do? Is it going to decrease? Is it going to cause a decrease in water volume? Or a decrease in extracellular fluid volume? And an increase in intracellular fluid volume?
I would say it will decrease the water volume because then
Uh,
your pressure will
I agree with
drop.
Zena.
I think it's going to decrease the water volume. You guys, I think the answer is A. Because initially, taking a measure of any of whatever blood is left, it's not going to affect the osmolarity. But you can lose a lot of blood, and that's going to cause you to lose a lot of water.
Right. I agree.
I was just reading the story about my cousin who hemorrhaged after her third baby was born. And it was actually a couple of weeks afterwards. But she lost over a third of her blood volume. And did it on a church bathroom floor. And I didn't realize the whole story, but she posted it on Facebook and I was a little shocked to say the least. But she's fine. And she actually had 2 more children after that baby. But and that baby that she had and then hemorrhaged is now Navy star. She's a pretty amazing Navy person.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Atrial natriuretic peptide, AMP, reduces the blood pressure and volume. Remember what this is doing. So it's being released from the atria in response to increased stretch in the atria because of increased volume. So if you're getting increased stretch because there's increased blood volume, this is going to work to inhibit blood volume and thereby inhibit blood pressure. So it's going to cause events that are going to promote, it's going to inhibit things that are going to increase the blood pressure. And it's going to inhibit water retention, thereby causing you to secrete more water and sodium in the urine. It has potent effects in diuretics because it's going to promote sodium and water excretion, inhibiting angiotensin II. Mom, come here. Really quick. So increased stretch of the atria is going to result in, yes, he's more than happy up here. Increased stretch of the atria due to increased blood pressure is going to cause release of atrial natriuretic peptide, which is going to target the hypothalamus, the adrenal cortex, and the juxtaglomerular apparatus. So this is going to do exactly the opposite of aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone and angiotensin II. It's going to work on the hypothalamus and posterior pituitary to decrease ADH release. It's going to inhibit the collecting ducts of the kidneys and decrease water and sodium reabsorption, decreasing blood volume. It's going to work on the adrenal cortex to decrease aldosterone release, inhibiting water reabsorption and sodium reabsorption. It's going to inhibit the juxtaglomerular apparatus of the kidneys, decreasing renin release, decreasing angiotensin II release, causing increased vasodilation. All of these are going to work to decrease blood pressure. Some other things that especially females really understand, probably more than males do with at least the first two here. Estrogen enhances sodium reabsorption via the renal tubules. And if you're going to have enhanced water reabsorption, guess what? You have enhanced water If you're going to have enhanced sodium reabsorption, you're going to have enhanced water reabsorption. This is why you often feel bloated during your menstrual cycles.
Always.
What?
I said always. But I don't really get them anymore because I'm reaching an age, but I still get the hormonal fluctuations.
Well, and it's also you're dropping estrogen. Actually, you're dropping progesterone is why you feel tired. Actually, I think it's a drop in estrogen that makes you feel tired. It's also responsible for the edema during pregnancy. Progesterone is going to decrease sodium reabsorption, therefore acting as an antidiuretic. Acting as a diuretic, promoting sodium and water loss. Glucocorticoids, aka steroids, form of steroids, are going to enhance sodium reabsorption and promote edema. You've known people who are on steroid treatment who struggle with edema. Okay, remember, as we walk into potassium here, we're moving into potassium. It's doing the opposite of sodium. Number one here, it's doing the opposite of sodium. When we look at the flow of potassium, it's the opposite of sodium. So relative intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid potassium concentrations affect a cell's resting potential. Remember, that's why we have to have potassium being really low really low outside of the cell because it's really high inside the cell. Excessive extracellular fluid potassium is going to decrease the membrane potential. Too little potassium causes hyperpolarization and non-responsiveness. Hyperkalemia and hypokalemia can disrupt electrical conduction in the heart and cause sudden death. When they give people lethal injections in prisons, they're giving them a high level of potassium chloride. What you do is you essentially kill the membrane potential, the resting membrane potential, and everything stops. ion shifts in and out of the cell. So I didn't do this completely right, and I knew that I had it a little wrong. Hydrogen ions are going to move the opposite of potassium. So I knew that I was wrong. I had an idea that I was wrong. This right here. Actually, this, oh, stop that. I didn't want to remove all of that. As I'm now not able to work with both hands because my cat's decided this is where he wants to be right now. Or I would type this. Potassium moves this way. In conflict. Potassium still moves this way. Hydrogen moves this way. So it's working in opposition. Hydrogen ions are moving in opposition of potassium.
So I'm assuming the sodium, hydrogen, and chlorine all go the same way, because the chlorine also, you say, follows the sodium.
Let's say yes for right now.
Okay.
Yes for right now. And if I need to, I'll come back and erase this, but let's say yes for right now. So this is what Zena was saying. So hydrogen ions are going to shift in and out of the cells. And they're going to lead to corresponding shifts of potassium in the opposite direction. Oh, cat here. Effects of potassium imbalances on membrane potentials. So if potassium, so normally, remember, potassium is has the most effect on the resting membrane potential. Normal resting membrane potential with normal kalemia. Normal kalemia. If potassium levels get elevated in the extracellular fluid, the resting membrane potential gets reduced. It's no longer minus 70, it's more like minus 60. There's less diffusion of potassium out of the cell. And the cells are more excitable because they're more likely to reach that threshold. Remember that minus 60, minus 55 threshold. For Zena, this is probably one of the few benefits to having 121 at the same time she's having 122. Okay, are you ready to get down from where your perch? Oh, cat. Ouch, 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 ouch. Seriously, what are you doing? He says, I don't know. Yeah, what are you doing? He says he was just getting comfortable. I do clip his claws so he's not clawing the heck out of my shoulder, but he's still trying to get comfortable. Oh.
He's adorable.
He's a monster is what he is.
Oh my goodness, he's so handsome.
Are you a handsome boy? Yeah, you
He is a handsome boy. Yeah.
are. He knows it too, and that's the problem. So reduced extracellular potassium is going to lead to a decrease or an increase in the resting membrane potential. So the cell's going to be hyperpolarized. Rather than being at -70, it's going to be at -75. Well, if you're at -75, you're going to have less of a chance of reaching the threshold to fire an action potential. So cells are hyperpolarized and they're a lot less excitable. Oh, boy. Seriously. Less than 15% of potassium is lost in the urine, regardless of need. So most of it is going to be reabsorbed. 85% of it is going to be reabsorbed. Potassium is controlled in the cortical collecting ducts by changing how much is being secreted. Potassium, the excessive potassium is going to be excreted if it goes over the basal levels of reabsorption. Remember that transport maximum? If it goes over the transport maximum, then potassium levels will be excreted. When potassium levels are low, the amount of secretion and excretion is kept to a minimum. Leo, seriously, Mom, will you come and grab him? You're being a pill. I know, your life is hard. When potassium levels are low, the amount of secretion and excretion is kept to a minimum. Type A intercalated disc can reabsorb some filtrate. Mother, would you come and grab him? He's just decided, don't hang on.
Oh, he's so adorable. He's so handsome.
He's a pain in the butt is what he is.
He was not happy.
No, he was not.
I know he swears at me frequently.
That's hilarious.
Such a stinker butt. All right.
Now he's swearing at me and Louie.
Be swearing to such a pill. Oh, buddy. This is why I don't keep a lot of new shirts around, is because I have cats that claw holes into them. When potassium levels are low, the amount of secretion and excretion is kept to a minimum, because if potassium levels are low, do you want to lose it in the urine? No, you're going to work to reabsorb it. The type A intercalated cells work to reabsorb some potassium left. Looking here, potassium is going to move in the opposite direction of hydrogen ions. This is important when we look at the relationship between acid base and potassium imbalances. Too much hydrogen is going to result in an increase in potassium. Too little hydrogen is going to result in a decrease in potassium. For this same reason, potassium is moving out of the cells while hydrogen is moving in. High potassium levels in the extracellular fluid is going to favor principal cells. I'm going to back up just for a second. Intercalated cells are going to use potassium to regulate the pH because we know that hydrogen ions move in the opposite direction. So intercalated cells are found in the distal convoluted tubules and the collecting duct. In contrast, principal cells are going to be working for sodium and potassium. High potassium concentrations is going to favor the secretion of potassium because we need to bring down the levels of potassium. If there's low potassium or accelerated levels of potassium loss, we're going to stop trying to secrete potassium and we're going to work to keep it in the blood. And if we have low potassium levels, we have high sodium levels. If we have high potassium levels, we have low sodium levels. So aldosterone is going to stimulate potassium ion secretion by the principal cells because it's going to work to reabsorb sodium. And remember, they work in opposition. So aldosterone is going to stimulate potassium ion secretion and reabsorption of sodium. In the cortical cells, for every sodium that's reabsorbed, one potassium is excreted or secreted. Increased potassium in the extracellular fluid is going to cause release of aldosterone. Because if we have increased potassium, we know that we have reduced sodium. Potassium controls its own concentration via feedback regulation of aldosterone. So aldosterone decreases potassium levels but increases sodium levels. And if ADH is present, increases water levels. Another thing to keep in mind is that if aldosterone, since aldosterone, let's say it this way. Since aldosterone decreases potassium levels, will increase hydrogen ion levels because it works in opposition. It's hydrogen ion levels and chlorine levels. What is the most abundant cation in the intracellular fluid?
Potassium.
Potassium, right. What is the greatest determinant of intracellular water volume?
Sodium.
I would say sodium. Part of me wants to say potassium, but I think I'm going to say I will make sure of this one. I'll look it up in between, but I think it's potassium. But that also means that sodium levels have to be low. Regulation of calcium. Calcium is important for blood clotting. It's important for cell membrane permeability. When we talk about exocytosis, release of neurotransmitter, when we talk about what else? Release of neurotransmitter, other releases from cells, it's related to calcium. So secretory behavior of cells, whether things are released from cells or not, is related to calcium. Hypocalcemia results in increased excitability, causes muscle tetany, meaning too much stimulation of muscles. Hypercalcemia is going to inhibit neurons and muscle cells and cause heart arrhythmias. Calcium balance is controlled by parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. So when high calcium levels are too high, the thyroid gland is going to release calcitonin. Calcitonin is going to cause reabsorption of calcium by the bones. And calcium levels are going to fall. Also going to result in excretion of calcium in the urine. When calcium levels are too low, the parathyroid hormone is going to release parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid glands are going to release parathyroid hormone. And blood calcium levels are going to rise. Well, how does this relate to phosphate? Parathyroid hormone is going to increase blood calcium levels here by targeting osteoclasts to break down more bone matrix, releasing calcium into the blood. Enhance intestinal absorption of calcium resulting in increased blood calcium levels. And enhance calcium reabsorption in the kidneys by decreasing phosphate. So sodium, hydrogen ions, and chlorine are all moving in opposition to potassium. Similarly, you guys, this is one of your questions on the most recent case study. If you increase calcium reabsorption, you're going to excrete or secrete more phosphate. If you reabsorb more phosphate, you're going to excrete more calcium. So calcium reabsorption and phosphate excretion go hand in hand. Filtered phosphate is going to be reabsorbed in the proximal convoluted tubules. When this happens, calcium is going to be secreted or excreted. We're going to find more calcium in the urine. In the absence of parathyroid hormone, phosphate reabsorption is regulated by its transport maximum, and excesses are going to be excreted in the urine. High or normal levels of parathyroid hormone are going to result in no parathyroid hormone being secreted by the thyroid gland, parathyroid gland. Therefore, the release of calcium from the bone is going to be inhibited. And we're going to find large amounts of calcium being lost in the feces and in the urine, but more phosphate is going to be retained. So calcitonin, in opposition to parathyroid hormone, remember it's released when blood calcium levels are high. Calcitonin is going to work as an antagonist to parathyroid hormone. But its contribution to calcium and phosphate excretion and secretion is minor. Chlorine, remember how I told you if you follow sodium, if the cell is permeable to chlorine, if the membrane is permeable to chlorine, chlorine will follow sodium. So chlorine is a major anion that accompanies sodium in the extracellular fluid. 19% of chlorine is reabsorbed under normal pH conditions. When acidosis occurs, fewer chlorine ions are reabsorbed. Other anions have transport maximums and are excreted in the urine. This is just a summary showing causes of major electrolyte imbalances. What causes them and what symptoms can be observed with them. And I'm not going to read through all this. Do you have questions so far? Stay with me for just a few more minutes here. We're going to start this. We will finish this afternoon after we work through the digestive system. Do me a favor in between now and we get together in lab. Read through the question, see if you can, and I don't know how the student view is for the Wiley exercises, but read through the questions for the mechanical and chemical digestion. So acids, bases, and pH. Acids dissociate in water to release hydrogen ions. The most common acids in the body include hydrochloric acid in the stomach and carbonic acid in the blood. Hydrogen ions play important roles in the digestion of food, which we'll talk about this afternoon, in activation of microbes and pathogens, because of the high pH denatures them. Excuse me, intracellular digestion of lysosomes. Remember how lysosomes tend to have a very acidic environment. And the high hydrogen ion gradient is a critical component of ATP synthesis in the mitochondria. Bases, by definition, accept hydrogen ions in solution by generally producing a salt and a molecule of water. Bicarbonate is the most common base in the human body. And other bases, bicarbonate and other bases, are common components of buffer systems that help resist dramatic swings in the hydrogen ion concentration. The pH scale measures the hydrogen ion, the free hydrogen ion concentration in solution. And the pH equals the negative log of the hydrogen ion concentration. So pH is essentially the inverse of how many hydrogen ions you have. The more hydrogen ions you have, the lower the pH, meaning the more acidic you are. The less hydrogen ions you have, the greater the pH value, therefore the more basic you are. So an increase in the hydrogen ions results in the solution with a lower pH. And a solution with a lower hydrogen ion concentration has a higher pH, meaning you're more basic. And you guys, that is where we're going to end right now. Let's come back and what I'll go through. I told you the PowerPoint for the lab, I kept it fairly short. We will go through that and we will finish this up. And I will talk to you in an hour and 20 minutes.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Of course, thank you. Sapphire Alexia, are you here? I'm gonna end the meeting.